Today we're taking a trip back over to Disneyland and talking about the newest cover athlete, or one of them at least, on the latest edition of the NHL video games published by EA Sports. As we know, Darnell Nurse's cousin Sarah Nurse, who is a very good hockey player, is on the cover, alongside of an Anaheim Ducks superstar whose name has been all over the press with his lacrosse goals, his really beautiful shootout goals in the All-Star competition, and just his overall prowess as a rookie in general. Let's talk today about Anaheim Ducks forward Trevor Zegras, and one of my most favorite stories when it comes to this player and his profile when he was a prospect. This is actually like the third time we've made this video. We made it back in 2019 when the draft was going on. We made it back in November of 2020, a year after that draft had commenced, and now, after the player has concluded his rookie season, I feel like it's appropriate to go out there and talk one more time about how the Vancouver Canucks almost traded up in that draft with the Red Wings to take Zegras himself. Or at least, that's what's been potentially reported. So, let's take a time machine back to 2019 and review what happened in that season's worth of a draft year. You had yourselves the US NTDP, wherein the first overall pick, Jack Hughes, would be taken from. However, that team was dubbed by many people, like Craig Button for example, as a generational junior team. Because not only did you have yourselves the first overall pick in Jack Hughes, but you also had yourselves the 5th overall pick in Alex Turcotte, the 15th overall pick in Cole Caulfield, the 14th overall pick in Cam York, and I believe the 12th overall pick, Spencer Knight, if not 13th overall, something like that. There were so many good players on this NTDP team, and Trevor Zegras happened to be one of them as well. In the season leading up to the draft, Trevor Zegras for the NTDP had 87 points in 60 games played. Even though he didn't have the most points on the team, even though he wasn't the best player on the team, you still had players like Jack Hughes and Cole Caulfield going out there and saying the same thing, that hey, Trevor Zegras is the most creative and dazzling player on our squad. Like, when it comes to somebody who just tries to think of the craziest thing you can do on the ice, Trevor Zegras is the player who is going to do that, and he is the player that is going to succeed in accomplishing that, because his skills, his hockey IQ, his pizzazz, it's all there. Not to mention the fact that he's a pretty good dude, or at least he seems like a pretty good dude, at least. When he talks in the interviews, he's actually pretty vivacious with his personality. He is not afraid to go out there and give his opinion, which is pretty nice to see, especially when he's talking about things like Jay Beagle, for example. But Trevor Zegras was seen as a top prospect in the NHL Draft with elite potential. There were some concerns as to whether or not he actually would translate, if the skills and the pizzazz and the dangling and all that would properly work itself up from the NTDP to the NCAA to the AHL to the NHL. As a result, he was ranked to go 14th by Elite Prospects, 10th by ISS, 8th by Future Considerations, 6th by McKeen's, and 7th by TSN and Bob McKenzie. With that being said, though, at the NHL draft stage, there was a point at the 6th overall spot where he was still available. Now, enter the Vancouver Canucks into this discussion, because earlier on in the year, we had ourselves some rumors, here's from Rick Dhaliwal back in 2019, that the Canucks could bring in 2 to 3 potential draft picks next week to Vancouver for extended interviews. A BCHL source tells me that Grizzlies forward Alex Newhook could be one of them. Dhaliwal said that he also believes that Trevor Zegras will get an extended interview with the Canucks too, not to mention Peyton Krebs being yet another extended interview player the Canucks had on their radar. Here's another tweet from Dhaliwal around the same time. The Canucks had a good meeting with Trevor Zegras today. They really like this kid a lot, but the question is, can they move up to get him? Then you go over this series of tweets right here from JD Burke on the day of the draft. I'm hearing from a source that the Canucks are actively trying to move up in the draft. Most likely their destination, their crosshairs, is the Detroit Red Wings pick at 6th overall. No word yet on what the framework for such a deal would look like. Negotiations are ongoing. It's an exploratory phase. In the interest of posterity, nothing is also imminent, at least that's my understanding. We have a reply from Chris here, who asks, who would the Canucks grab at number 6? JT Burke replied, saying if the Canucks do end up moving to number 6 in the draft, my guess is they're doing so to land Trevor Zegras. And so, with all this information in mind, it seems very apparent that at some point in the 2019 draft, the Vancouver Canucks were trying to move up from their 10th overall pick all the way to number 6 in order to take the NTDP's skilled wizard Michigan boy. Or I guess Boston boy, because he played in Boston in the NCAA. He scores Michigan goals, though, that's what I mean. The Vancouver Canucks would have traded away what would have been their 10th overall pick, which they used to select Vasily Podkolzin in this trade, plus a few other things here and there, maybe another draft pick or another prospect or something else, and the Red Wings would have slipped all the way to 10. Now, in hindsight, this actually seems like a pretty dangerous type of move because Moritz Seider was the guy that the Red Wings ended up getting at 6th overall in that draft. That guy just won the Calder, against Trevor Zegras too, for that matter, and Seider is already looking like one of the better defensemen in the entire NHL, if not the best defenseman already on the Red Wings. So, for Detroit, them risking moving from 6 all the way to 10 probably would have been a bit dangerous when you consider that the Oilers were also looking at a defenseman as well. They took Broberg in the top 10 of this draft. And then you go over what happened on the Vancouver side of things. They had themselves a chance to get any one of the other draft interview guys that they had in Krebs and Newhook because they both were available at 10th overall. Trevor Zegras in real life went 9th to the Ducks, so one pick before Vancouver's, and the Canucks ended up taking Podkolzin with their next pick because he was the next available player on their board. It's just kind of nuts, though, when you think about how everything could have gone down, because if the Vancouver Canucks make a trade for Trevor Zegras, all of a sudden you have Zegras and Pettersson playing together? You think about the possibilities, the skill, the star power, the pizzazz behind all of that stuff. Talk about Höglander and Zegras playing on the same team, two guys that can both score lacrosse, Zorro, Michigan goals like crazy. Trevor Zegras isn't even all flash and no bite either. The guy went out there with 61 points in 75 games played in this most recent season as a rookie, and he was so good, so skilled that he's now on the cover of the NHL video game. Like, no disrespect to Moritz Seider. I feel like if the Vancouver Canucks moved up to 6th overall and they took Seider, things would have been amazing here in Vancouver. Like, I do not want to understate how good of an impact Moritz Seider could have had he been a part of the Canucks, but Trevor Zegras too, man, especially hearing that he was the guy that was in their sights as well for months leading into the draft, like, man, it gets kind of crazy when you think about what could have happened and the hypothetical situations that could have presented themselves had the conversations that went down at the draft gone a little bit differently. Like, don't get me wrong, I like Podkolzin, I do think he's a good player, but at the same time, you've had so much maturity between all the guys around him in this draft earlier on that it's difficult to go out there and say with 100% certainty that, yeah, he was the best pick available at 10th overall. Seider at 6 is amazing. Zegras at 9 to Anaheim is great. You have yourselves Matt Boldy, who was a Minnesota Wild pick that is still really good too. Now you have Caulfield at 15, Newhook at 16, Krebs at 17. All these guys are doing so well, and I feel like Podkolzin, he's got a really high ceiling, that's for sure, but we need to wait a little bit more to see him really fulfill that type of potential. So, long term, I'm still a big fan of Podkolzin. Would I have liked to have Zegras instead? If you're twisting my arm, I would say yes. Would I have liked to have Seider instead, had the Canucks moved up to 6th overall? Yes, 1,000,000% yes. If you're twisting my arm, heck, if you're even just kind of lightly tapping me on the shoulder, I'd say yes to that idea. And for the Red Wings in general, it's just kind of interesting hearing that they could have moved down to 10th overall, because if Seider had been taken off the board before Detroit ended up picking, let's say they moved down from 6 to 10, Seider goes to Edmonton or whatever because they wanted a D-man, and all of a sudden the Oilers are left with a choice to make between like Boldy or Caulfield or Krebs or Soderstrom or Cam York. I don't know where they go, man. Like, I guess Steve Yzerman likes his Swedes, so maybe they go Soderstrom, but then again, no. They like big defensemen, right? Like Edvinsson and Seider. Soderstrom is not that big, so I'm not really too sure if he would have been the type of guy that was on their radar. I don't know, though. It's a mixed bag. If you're a Detroit fan, talk to me in the comments on your thoughts about what you think Yzerman would have done had he traded down in the 2019 draft to not select Seider and have Vancouver select Zegras in that 6th overall spot instead. Who do you think they would select instead, and how good do you think that player would be with the Red Wings? If you're a Canucks fan, talk to me in the comments on your thoughts about Trevor Zegras being a prime Vancouver target that they were trying to move up in the draft in order to get. Do you think it was the right decision to step back and maybe just let it happen after they weren't able to get it done? Or, knowing what you know now about Podkolzin, knowing what you know now about Trevor Zegras, would you have wanted to push for that even more? Hey, okay, they said no, we need to go out there and double it up the ante because we need to get that Zegras kid. Or would you have preferred if the Vancouver Canucks traded up and took Seider instead, because that is a very real idea that I think would have benefited the Canucks way more than Trevor Zegras by himself, but still. Talk to me in the comments on your thoughts. Also, Ducks fans, let me know how lucky you're feeling right now to have gotten Zegras at 9, because man, that guy probably should have gone a lot earlier now with all the things that we've known about the draft revisited in 2022. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Juraj, and bye.